Welcome to Paranormal M, where reality takes a detour into the unknown. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, maybe even drop a comment, and be the first to unravel our latest enigmatic stories. Brace yourself for a thought-provoking experience that goes beyond the ordinary. Don't buy antiques. Okay, this is the worst time that I had the strangest dreams coming across my sleep since I ever bought something at an antique shop. And silly me for buying something very old. Well, I bought a handmade canvas statue of a bulldog. It was kind of in a lying down posture, and it was $40 at my local antique shop. I thought it looked nice for my room as I was decorating, so I purchased the statue, placed it in my room. However, a few days after buying this dog statue, I began to have strange dreams of random creepy things. Not so scary, but, well, very strange. Made me scratch my head and try to think deeply of what it's trying to tell me. Until now, I had a very, very strange dream, and just made me decide to throw away the dog statue, once and for all. Here's the dream. I was laying in my bed, inside my room, when all of a sudden, I heard footsteps going rapidly, fast. It was from the left to the right, and I could see the shadow moving fast. Then all of a sudden it jumped on my bed. Well, somehow I closed my eyes in my dream and asked who it was. Yeah, I literally could speak in my dream. Rare occasions, but what shocked me the most was that I felt the footsteps while it was running. I heard it moan deeply, like it was answering my question. I then asked again, "Who the fuck is this?" I asked it kind of pissed off, and it moaned again, like it couldn't talk, but it could moan. So, I immediately woke up after this stupid situation, and personally, I'm not scared of the paranormal in reality, but when you go to haunted places and come across a ghost trying to peek its little head out and see if you're there. But in dreams, you can't control yourself 100%. And whatever you visualize, it's going to show up and could show itself right in your face, at one point anyway, while in your sleeping state. Now, soon I'm going to be throwing this statue and buying me a dream catcher. I want to warn everyone here and be aware of what you're going to buy at an antique shop. You just never know what you're really bringing back to your home, huh? Some interesting things happening. So, since moving into my house in the last 3 years, some interesting things have happened. I live with my mom and 2-year-old daughter. I thought I'd share them. A few years ago, I was in the bathroom. I brushed my teeth, put lip balm on, and dropped the lid. There was a black bath mat at the sink, and behind that is the bath. So there's nowhere really for it to go. It's a really small space. Looked up and down. Basically looked from the bathroom for like 20 minutes and I couldn't find it. Told my mom, she came, looked, nothing. It was a white lid. I thought stuff it. I can't find it. I even said to my mom, it's like it fell into another world. I went back like hours later to grab something, opened the door, turned the light on, and clear as day it was sitting smack bang in the middle of the black bath mat. It sent shivers down my spine. It was so odd to me. There's no way it could have, how I could have missed it. So I picked up the bath mat and shook it while looking. In the last year, I lost a necklace of mine. Same thing. Looked all over the house, bathroom included. Couldn't find it. Then went into the bathroom late at night, and it was sitting on the sink. Right there, clear as day. Could not be missed. Right in the middle of the left side. I emptied the whole sink top off when I was looking. Everything. Wiped down everything too. And the sink while I was there. I didn't wipe over it. It just wasn't there. Spirits and dreams. I've always felt energy everywhere I go, and my family have always been in tune with spirits. Ever since I was 5 years old, me and my brother have witnessed spirits in our homes, and always had a huge fascination with them too. Since I was around 13, I had intense sleep paralysis. I also witnessed a dark energy in my home. My entire family also witnessed this dark mass of energy multiple times too. Around this time, my parents were super negative, always fighting. Dad super verbally abusive, and physically to my mother. Mother was an alcoholic, so it set a lot of shitty energy going around this room. I also started to receive visitation dreams from past relatives. They would pass on messages. Me and my brother used to hear footsteps in the attic, and an old guitar which was enclosed in a case would also play. That one freaked me out the most. As the years went on, and my brother always said that there was a dark energy in our home, but our parents could never see it or believe it. Eventually, my parents divorced around 2 years ago. I started to become more in tune with energy around 3 years ago, and my sleep paralysis began to stop. I guess I was in more control. These last couple of weeks I had an off feeling of energy, as if someone was going to pass soon. My grandmother had gotten very quickly in decline in health terms, which I feel will come to an end soon. Overall, my question is, do any of you believe I could have a connection with a spirit, or could I just be looking too far into things? Last week I had a dream. In this dream, I found out I was pregnant, and then had a visitation dream from my grandparents. They were so happy to see me, and that we were just catching up. As if we see each other all the time, actually. And last night I had a dream I was in a forest with about 10 women. Got a sense of family from them and protection, but they were trying to explain to me that I have this gift to connect with them, and how I can always reach out to them. I then further dreamt that I had a baby girl, unsure if it was connected to the dream from the previous week. What do you see? Discussion. My husband and I had some very disturbing things that happened to us this summer. After we let a quote-unquote friend stay with us for about 2 weeks, we began to have strange things happen at our house. As crazy as it sounds, the guy we let stay with us claimed he needed somewhere to go because of, quote-unquote demonic shit. It was apparently happening wherever he was staying at the time. He was never more specific than that. Red flag much. We're pretty sure this guy was drugging us, poisoned my 9-year-old dog, Sonny, with rat poison, to the point that I had to put him to sleep. Damn. When I found out it was rat poison that caused his illness, it was too late. Sonny died while this guy was staying with us. After he died, we found rat poison behind the fridge that neither us nor our landlord put there. Sonny's food and water bowls were always up against the fridge near where the poison was hiding. Next to the poison, we found where somebody had made some sort of effigy out of a Q-tip and some of Sonny's dog hairs that was clearly made to look like our dog. So freaking weird. At this time, we were already hearing someone or something knock at our walls and windows at night. Always in threes. We were and are pretty sure the guy we let stay with us was breaking in and out of our house when we were gone. We discovered that he had made a makeshift altar out of random shelving that we had. We never noticed it while he was here. We're pretty hazy on some of the times, at least when we were there with him, which we've since figured out he was probably drugging us and possibly, hypnotizing us. We really aren't sure what we all went through, but he was there, and then after he left, I began questioning both mine and my husband's sanity. Every single night we would stay up, and without fail, something came knocking on our walls, on the ceiling from the attic. I thought we were going nuts, until one night one of our windows opened and we heard pigs squealing, or to be more clear, someone or something making that noise. We've yet to put this whole thing together, and there's so much to everything that happened that I really truly don't know where to begin. I know that I'm done talking with any friend or family member about it, because everyone seems very skeptical of it. I'm so tired of people making me and us feel crazy for like that horror movie nightmare that we lived in for 3 months. I just don't talk about it anymore at all. I'm reaching out to you guys in desperation to find out what the hell was happening in my house. What was happening to my husband and I? Do you see anything in this photo? This photo may be nothing, or it may be something. This is one of those nights when I was up working on my laptop. We believe we were very guarded because we believed someone had been breaking into our house. We found a glass bowl of pennies with 2 bullets lying on top of it. It was on our nightstand by the bed, and all sorts of other strange things, plus the knocking sounds. I started to feel like it may be more than someone fucking with us, and felt like there was this bad energy. Sometimes I'd knock back on the wall, and then someone or something would knock 3 times again in return. Weird shit. Anyway, I was on the floor of my laptop near this window when we started hearing noises outside again, squealing and knocking. After a couple of minutes, I had decided to start taking photos outside the window to see if I could catch anything quickly. This photo was taken as I hurried to raise the blinds. I knocked them off altogether. It made a loud crash when I did so, but I still snapped the photo quickly. If that's a person's face I'm seeing, and I'm really not certain what it is that I'm seeing, at the time I thought it looked like a jester or something, but with an unsmiling face. I feel like a person would have looked shocked or caught by surprise, but the image I saw and still see today seems unmoved. Maybe I was exhausted and seeing too much into it. Maybe it's pareidolia, nothing more. Maybe there's more there that I cannot see. One of you guys can enhance the photo and see if there's anything else. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's a demon. Maybe it's nothing. The only thing I'm sure of is that some weird shit was happening at the time and things felt not right. I lurk Reddit, and I don't post a lot. I thought about posting this with a throwaway, but decided against it because I wanted you guys to know I'm serious and not some person trying to get attention or shitposting. Regardless of what's in the photo, weird shit happened to us. Bad shit even. I've been, left very depressed over things that happened to us over the summer. I'm nearly 4 months pregnant now with my first baby, but I had 3 previous miscarriages. This is the farthest along I've ever been, and I should be, well, really, really happy. This is something I wanted badly, but I can't shake this, well, call it PTSD or whatever it is. I know I didn't go into the whole entire story, but I'd be happy to answer any and all questions, and possibly expand on anything you guys want me to. Without sounding silly, I have to admit that a lot of the things I found around the house I Googled with witchcraft as a search and just kept being directed to sites about hoodoo. Voodoo? I was living in northeast Texas near Arkansas and Louisiana borders. We've not stayed in this house since August, but we are in the same town. Ask Reddit. I grew up on a farm on the west coast of Scotland. This farm was on the top of a hill about 3 miles outside of the nearest village. The oldest part of the house, well, now used as the kitchen, along with the room above it. This part of the building had been continuously in use for at least, 500 years. Although there's evidence of people having lived on that spot for far longer. My older brother and I shared the room directly above the kitchen. We had a separate staircase for everybody else. Several internal doors separated us from the main house. These doors could not be opened silently. Our grandmother, who we lived with, she told us not to worry about the noises at night, and that she thought the farm was haunted. We laughed it off to begin with, but I swear that once or twice a month we would be woken by heavy, fast-moving footsteps running up and down the old wooden stairs outside her bedroom door. Up and down for around 20 minutes at a time late at night. Far too heavy and fast-moving to be her grandmother. Sometimes the steps would pause, creaking on the floorboards outside our rooms for a minute or two at a time. We never ever left our room if we heard anything, and I'm still not sure what it could have been. Still spooks me out thinking about it. Got more spooky tales on growing up in a very old farm in Scotland, along with some of my grandmother's stories working in various old hospitals in Glasgow, if anyone's interested. A visitor. My grandfather passed on the 15th of this month. I spent 4 days by his side while he was on hospice, only left to sleep for a few hours, buy food or, anything else for the family that was there as well. On one of the nights we watched the movie Signs as a family. There's a side story here for that movie. My grandpa watched it with my 2 cousins when they were crazy young. When my aunt came back home, she saw all 3 of them wearing tinfoil hats while watching the movie. So we all put tinfoil hats on and watched it together. Then I took home my tinfoil hat. Tuesday night is when he passed away, and my mother and I were the only ones there when it happened. It was the oddest circumstance as well. My mom is his first child, and I'm then, of course, his first grandchild. We cried, said our goodbyes, and let everything take its course. The funeral home picking him up, etc. But before we left, my mother left something in his hand before he passed. But now we couldn't find it anywhere. We checked under the bed, under his arm, gone. Nowhere to be found. And even after they came and picked him up, they couldn't find anything. While we were searching for what was in his hand, a nurse said, "I found a dime." This was under his bed. My mom spoke up and said it was mine. I didn't say anything because it was the last thing on my mind. We were all going to our cars, but before we left, I grabbed his digital clock that I bought him. so that way he could know his day and time and temperature was for the day. And, well, I thought to myself, if there was any residual energy in this clock, I want it to be with me at home. Thursday night, I'm going to my car and I put my shoe on and I see a shimmer. It was a dime. So by my computer, I have a dime, a digital alarm clock, a tinfoil hat, and a guitar that my grandma gave me, grandpa, when I was in 8th grade. This is all in one corner of my game room. My wife texted me the other night from the living room saying, "I think you have a visitor." With the video attached to it, it was our puppy staring at that corner for a solid 30 seconds, looking up and down at something right next to me while I was playing on my computer. Encounter number 1. I want to start with stuff that happened when one of my best friends passed away. I won't get into the backstory. My boyfriend, Danny, passed away the day before Memorial Day in 2007. I took his passing hard. A couple of days after his burial, I came home and I was looking for a parking spot. Danny and I lived on the same block, still under the parents' roof, and the only parking spot that was available was straight up right in front of his house. I couldn't park there, not at first. I was still fucked by his passing. He was 26 years old, and I was 24. I must have circled the block a good 5 times until my girlfriend at the time kind of got fed up and told me to just go park. Before I started reversing, I had this weird feeling that Danny had kind of saved that parking for me. I know it sounds crazy, but I looked toward his house, and out loud I thanked him for saving me a parking spot. 20 seconds tops, I was parked. And then I saw this orb, a little ball of light, but as bright, well, it was bright-ass flying over the truck. My girl was looking at me like I was tripping. She didn't see what I was seeing. I get out of the truck and start walking to the house, and this ball of light is following me from across the street, but high up, like 2-story levels of a 2 flat. But it was like in the trees. I'm getting loud at this point with my now ex because she's laughing at me, and I'm like, how the fuck don't you see it? We get in the house, and this ball of light, I shit you not, it's now in my room, and at the moment I knew it was Danny, like saying goodbye. When I said I took his death hard, literally hurt my heart. I couldn't even make it to his burial because of how distraught I was. I've never cried like that, and living in Chicago, I've lost other friends, but shit, not even the breaking with the first love hurt like that. I remember saying in my room that I was really talking to him, and I told him that, he had to go to the light. I told him not to worry and that I was going to see him again. And within a few seconds, the little ball of light disappeared. Encounter number 2. My second encounter with the boy Danny happened in a dream. A dream that felt all too real. In this dream, I was driving down a highway in an expressway. I was driving a nice white car. The interior was beige. As I was driving, I happened to look over at a passenger, and there he was. Danny was in the passenger seat. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And in this dream, when I looked at him, and he looked at me, I straight out in a shocked tone of voice asked him, "Danny, what the fuck are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead." I shit you not. He looked at me with a happy-ass smile on his face, and just chilling there, enjoying the ride, and said, "I am, but that doesn't mean I still ain't here with you." All I did was nod at him and said, "Fuck it." I reached for the volume to turn the music up, and I remember feeling the bass from the subs in the trunk, and I woke up. I just laid there in bed trying to grasp and understand what I just dreamt. For one, I didn't have a white car. I was driving this old rusted-up four-door Honda Civic. Straight-up piece of shit. But the sucker ran great and was good on gas. 2, where was I driving? Seemed real as fuck. Fast forward a couple of months later, and I bought a 2002 Buick Century. First thing I did was slap a sound system in it. New radio, 12-inch kicker subs, 1,200-watt kicker amp. Car was nice. I lived in Palatine, Illinois at the time, right off Rand Road. This information is for readers to Google Map stuff. I worked right off at the 290 in Higgins Road. I would jump on Route 53. It's like a highway and expressway to get to work. A straight shot short drive, really. One day I'm stuck in traffic on my way to work. While in traffic, I'd looked over out my passenger window and noticed a park. It's a park with a lake where you can kind of take a 2-seater pedal boat out in a nice date kind of a thing. I'd been there once before, but I never paid attention to it, at least on my normal drives. This time I looked at it and I had deja vu like a motherfucker. The whole scene was deja vu. That's when it hit me. This is where it happened in my dream. My Century was white with beige interior, and I had the subs banging, chilling in traffic. I was shocked at first, and in real life at this exact moment I said it again. Did it without really even thinking. I said, fuck it. Reached the volume and turned the music up. Still can't get his smile out of my head like he knew eventually I'd figured out. Yeah, it was a dream, but it was too real. My boy, my homie, my boyfriend's still with me. It's currently 6:23 a.m. Yesterday was my 40th birthday. I'm gonna have a beer right now. A house full of demon. I'm an investor. I purchase rundown houses and I rehab them as a bit of a side hustle. I sold my primary house in Massachusetts in 2020 and purchased a few rentals in northwestern Florida and the 2 adjoining lots in need of major repair. It's in a pretty run-down part of town. Took me 2 years to rehab 2 duplexes in a single house. I stayed in the single house. Across the street from me was an old vacant church built circa 1930, and to the house of it sits a small vacant house on the end of a street. I asked the neighbors to see who owns the small house, hoping to buy it and fix it up. I was told that it sat empty for, I guess, well over 5 years, and someone had gotten murdered in it 15 years back. Still hoping to talk to the owner, I got my chance one day. That's when I was working on my roof. I saw someone cutting the yard on the property. I asked if it was for sale. He said he would consider it. Well, a few weeks passed. He said that I can check out the house. I walked over, he opened the door and let me inside, but he stayed outside. I pulled out my phone and made a video of the interior of the 2 bedrooms and a kitchen and a bathroom. I felt my foot get wet, so I thought the roof must be leaking. I looked down on one of my Crocs, and the toes covered in wet red paint. I began to look for the source of this red paint, but I didn't see it anywhere. Then another drip on my feet. I then noticed my left arm was cut and bleeding. I was shocked, didn't remember how I got cut. I was trying to make sense of this thing, and that's when I get a burning sensation across my side. I lifted the shirt and saw 3 scratch marks across my belly. I ran out and told him I have to get a bandage for my cuts. I was just so confused on how this was even real. I began to replay the video, but it cut out, but the audio was still going. I kept quiet about this encounter. I just told my other friend about the house on the dead-end street with a crazy low price. He became curious, showed up at my place. I didn't tell him what happened to me. While we walked over to the front of the house, gazed from the outside from the chain-link fence. Right then, kind of got bad cutting his finger from the fence. Well, he went back to my place, bandaged his cut. He went home later that night. We removed the bandage and saw that the cut on his finger was gone, nothing. I then told the story to him. A year went by and the small house was sold to another investor. Many months of renovation went to an Airbnb vacation rental. A few months into the business, there was a large pool party in the backyard on a Saturday with over 100+ guests. I was outside making sure they won't park and trash all my properties. Then I had to leave to attend a family event. 40 minutes later, one of my tenants called and said the cops blocked all the roads leading into my properties. I drove as fast as I could home. And when I get to my street, many of the party attendees were outside of the little house, with police and ambulances. I asked one of my neighbors. He told me there was a shooting inside the house with 5 people getting shot and 1 killed. The gunman was never found. I didn't believe anything until it happened to me, the people that involved with this house. Now once again, it sits vacant, waiting for the next victim to draw blood. It's truly a demonic house. Conversations with dead people. When I was 13, my 4-year-old sister was run over by the city garbage truck in front of our house. It wasn't the first, but the most traumatic death that I've dealt with. It was bad enough that the first responders were sent for counseling, and I still suffer from PTSD because of it. But this is my father's story. My dad owned his business and understandably couldn't work for months afterwards. When he finally did return, on his first project back, he collapsed in the middle of the job site and was rushed to the hospital. He was diagnosed with a terminal illness and was told that if he didn't receive a liver transplant, he'd be dead in 6 months or less. He was always a stubborn guy and, well, he made it past 6 months. He actually went through 2 transplants as they botched the first, along with multiple other surgeries and procedures before succumbing to the disease a few years later. But I often wonder if what transpired during his transplant surgeries, if they may have been something to do with why he's been able to reach out since he passed. None of my other loved ones have. I don't know the reason. But I do know that the stories are worth sharing regardless. My father woke from his first transplant, and after the ventilator was removed, he mumbled a name or something to my aunt. She sort of dismissed it as a drug and stress-induced nonsense moment, until a couple of days later she was reading the newspaper, came across an obituary with the same name my father had mentioned. She asked him about it. He proceeded to tell her that a man was waiting for him on the other side of consciousness, that he had given my dad his full name and a message for his family, and proceeded to show my father his murder. Must be some strange coincidence or something, saying everyone's rational mind. But the more my father described it, prior to there being any published information about the death, the more impossible that became, including the murder occurring the same date and time as the surgery. The police were eventually called because my father was so insistent on the message, and it needed to be sent to this guy. His name was Brent, and he needed to send this to his loved ones. The detective that returned the call was obviously skeptical and dismissive. He basically asked my father quite sarcastically where the murder weapon could be found, since he had a front row seat and all. Brent had been in his girlfriend's house when her soon-to-be ex-husband showed up and shot them both. The woman survived, so the shooter was in custody, but Brent died on the scene. They had not recovered the gun. It was a detail really never made in public. To the detective's surprise, my dad told him correctly exactly where to find the gun. It was after that my father was told the man's mother would be calling him. He was able to tell her and the girlfriend that Brent loved them, and that they didn't need to worry because he was fine. My father kept in touch with Brent's mother over the years. I know how crazy it sounds, but it's true. The surgeons, as brilliant as they were, had not connected a bile duct in the first liver, so it was slowly dying. And so was my father. Actually, from the diagnosis, it seemed much more like a prolonged death rather than life. It was over a year before a second liver became available. My dad was in pretty rough shape by then. My family jokingly told him not to go solving any murder mysteries this time, and to just get through it. He laughed and said he'd try. I mentioned he was stubborn, but he was a sarcastic son of a bitch who taught me early that being a smartass was far superior to being a dumbass. So, he could dish the dark humor better than anyone. But this time around, there were no visions, messages, or conversations with dead people. But he was visited by one. He said that my sister sort of simply sat in his lap for the duration of the hour-long operation. He didn't see her or anything, he simply knew it was her. I don't know if the second one was that much harder on him or if it was just spending time with him and my sister, but he seemed to tip the scale even more to the side of dying after that. Not that he didn't fight, but that he had some of the fight taken out of him. Exactly 1 week before his 21st birthday, he died. I suppose seeing how difficult dying can be led me to do what I could to make any maternal grandparent's journey to the other side as painless as possible. My husband and I, along with our 2 small kids, moved in with them 2 years after my dad passed. This was so that way they could be at home until they died. Caring for them and my little one full-time was draining, and despite it being the goal, I felt horrible when my grandfather passed. I often cried myself to sleep, worrying about my grandma and a million other things. I'd moved into the room my grandma had slept in to be closer to my grandma, which was also weighing on me. Then one night I had what I call a dream, but I considered it to be a visit from my dad, basically. There was no visual or auditory sensory impression of any kind, and the physical sensation was very different from any dream I've ever had. My father simply sat, held my hand through the night. I simply knew it was his hand, so, it was just so familiar, even though it had been 2 years, really, since I'd held it, and even longer that I'd held it enough to recognize it just by the feel, and yet I did. Still cried the following night, but they were tears of joy. It was almost like I was a little girl having a bad dream until Daddy came to wake me up, even though it was just the opposite. There aren't really any words to describe it, but it's something I'll never forget. I didn't notice how similar it was to my sister's surgery visit to my father for several years, long after both of his visits had concluded. We were still living at my grandma's second time he came. My grandma wasn't doing so well, and our boxer dog, Jake, basically my third child, had suddenly developed a huge tumor. Now, along with being stubborn, sarcastic smartass, my father was also a dog lover and a hippie, though only the dog lover part is relevant. He'd never not had a dog, and when my niece, his first grandchild, started to speak, she called him Grandpa Doggy. And it fit so well we literally inscribed it on his headstone. So upon the realization and devastation of having to put my dog down, but also the knowledge that my dad was around somehow, I went to the porch alone and hysterically sobbed, speaking to him out loud. I begged him to watch for Jake and let him into his heavenly dog pack or however it worked, but to please just watch out for him until we could get there too. I live in the Rocky Mountains, where the weather can be somewhat confusing. This was an afternoon around the end of April and close to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet there were clouds overhead and an extremely light snowfall. I still smoked at that time, so after my blabbering and begging, I sat on the porch to smoke in a nearly hypnotized state, drained and staring north. I was staring at what I thought was nothing. You see, I'd been staring at a single snowflake since I sat down, which was close to 5 minutes now. I'd initially assumed it had fallen on a cobweb or something, until my brain kicked back. I realized that even if it had landed in the cobweb, it would have melted. Half the flakes were melting before they even hit the ground. There was a cold, electric, almost breeze all around me. I sat up straight, holding out my hand. I said, "Dad, if that's you, will you—" Didn't have to finish my sentence before the snowflake drifted up over a foot, and from my left side where it had been hovering and into the center of my palm, where it immediately melted. I didn't even have to finish the sentence. I could almost hear him sigh and picture him saying sarcastically, "Took you long enough, dumbass." To this day, I get goosebumps when I recall that time, and of course I cried again. It's been over 15 years since I last felt his presence. In the meantime, I've lost more people than I can say, including my mother and my son in 2017. I've had a moment or two of frustration or resentment, especially with my son, wondering why he can't just let me know he's okay or say hello, but I try to stop myself quickly. I'm lucky enough to have several experiences that continue to occur where I work. I've heard and seen things that, well, if logic were applied in an attempt to rationalize them, they'd make even less sense. I'm lucky enough to not have one but 2 occasions where my dad comforted me after his life was over. Lucky enough to have a conversation with a dead person, and to know in my heart and down to my core that my father was just stubborn enough to respond without words, but still able to deliver the same message for him after he delivered to Brent's family that he'd be okay and he loves me. So I hold on to that as truth, really, for everyone I've lost. And I'm passing on the message for anybody else who could use a little bit of hope. My father met a dead man. Trigger warning: murder. My father woke up from his first liver transplant surgery, and his first words after the breathing tube was removed were quite insistent and about somebody named Brent. My aunt and grandfather were in the room with him, and upon hearing this, my aunt assumed my father was dreaming about somebody that had gone to high school with, and who had the same name, perhaps. She calmed him down and told him to rest. He could talk about it later. The morphine had been making him and, well, maybe have some strange dreams and hallucinations, so it was easily dismissed as another one of those instances. That was until 2 days later when my aunt was reading the newspaper, came across the obituary of a stranger with the same first and last name my father had mentioned. She asked my father, who was much more lucid at this point, if he remembered mentioning the name. He went on to state very matter-of-factly that yes, like he'd tried to tell them, and he'd met the Brent from the obituary while having his transplant. Brent had been there when he went under, and taken my father to see a trailer where he had been shot and killed by his girlfriend's estranged husband. The girlfriend was also injured but survived. He stood next to my father and sort of narrated the events as they both watched. Brent asked my father to tell his mother and family that he was okay. This occurred back in 1995, so newspapers and phone books were the best available tools. My aunt looked in the paper again and found the news story about the homicide, paying attention to the details. Brent was killed the day of my father's surgery at the time that it was occurring. It was too strange to not be true. But the question was, what do you do with this information? My father obviously wanted to pass the message along, but finding this man's mother and contacting her out of the blue was out of the question. He hadn't believed in anything like this prior to it happening to him. Why would anyone else? So he sat with it. That was until he was released from the hospital. He decided to try contacting a detective that had been listed in the news story to just see what happened. My father recounted the information to this detective over the phone. The detective listened pretty intently, which included several details that were not included in the news releases. Surprisingly, the cop actually believed my father, but was still somewhat reluctant about putting him in contact with Brent's mother. He said he'd call back. When he called back, he asked my father where the suspect had put the murder weapon, because this was the detail that wasn't reported, and I suppose couldn't easily be guessed. My father went on to describe the location, the specific bush it was put in, and its direction from the trailer. The detective said he would speak to Brent's mother and give him her number. It was up to her if she wanted to call. That's how he put it. I guess it was a test, and my father passed. She did call shortly after my father was able to give her Brent's message. I was 15 when all this transpired. The man responsible for Brent's death had been apprehended almost immediately and was convicted. He recently had a parole hearing, but still in prison. This has definitely stuck with me throughout my life, and I'm a rational and skeptical person by nature, but having witnessed this series of events firsthand, I'm reminded that not everything that happens in this life can be explained. My family and I used to talk about it from time to time, but over time I've lost them. Starting with my father, my aunt being the most recent, and many others in between. I don't know what comes next or what this means as far as ghosts or spirits, but I know there's something beyond this life, and if Brent's okay, I imagine the rest of them are too. Exiting the simulation. Short, sweet, and to the point. Last night, while sleeping, I woke up in a dream to a location that seemed more real and more tangible than our current reality. Albeit brief, I felt more alive waking up while in the dream than I do now. When I came in my dream, I just was blindfolded, and then there were people there who were aware that I was awake. I sat up in a panic and they said, "You're not supposed to be here." And they shoved me back down into the dream. Being thrust back into the dream caused me to wake up into our current reality entirely befuddled. I've experienced sleep paralysis, and I've also experienced what I believe to be an alien abduction, which I've shared before. I'm not sure what any of this means, or if it means anything at all, other than the fact that I want to go back to wherever that was. That didn't feel like a dream. It felt more real than what I'm experiencing right now, typing this out. I don't know. Three knocks on the door. My mom and my aunt live out in the suburbs, not much around them except for a horse farm and some woods. My mother lives on the first floor, while my aunt lives on the second floor. They've lived in that house for 3 years. One day my grandmother broke down crying because she claimed someone was breaking into the house and stealing her things, misplacing items and leaving lights on. My aunt is a nurse, and dementia runs in her family, so she just assumed it was that. Regardless, my aunt installed cameras in the house to make my grandmother more comfortable, but obviously no one was breaking into the house. However, this year the indoor cameras caught the living room light was turning him on all by himself in the middle of the night. It even picked up movement and pointed itself toward the direction of the lamp. I chalked it up to faulty electricity. My aunt called an electrician. He checked everything out and said everything was fine. They ended up installing solar panels shortly after. Another time, my mom was shutting off lights and locking her doors for the night. She woke up in the morning and the bathroom faucet was running full speed. Thought it was weird, but we just left it at that. Then, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, the knocking started. My aunt and mom were very frightened because it's a house full of women with a young child and an older woman. It was only happening at night. They set up Ring doorbell cameras and said if they heard it again, they would call the cops for obvious reasons. Not too long after that, they heard knocking on the mom's door but saw no one on the camera. At this point, I'm thinking it's the wind shaking the door and it's rattling the door, well, creating a knocking sound. This October, I went over to announce my pregnancy to my family. We were waiting on my cousin to show up. It was about 10 p.m. and we all heard a pounding on my mom's front windows. We're waiting toward the back of the house. I'm excited, so I run over to answer the door, but his car isn't there and he's not there. Looking back, my mom's 2 dogs didn't bark nor follow me to the door as they usually do. I love those dogs, but you could leave a room and they'll start barking. So for them not to even bark or follow me to the door was very weird. My mom checked the cameras, and there's no one there. Not even a notification. My aunt, who lives on the 2nd floor, started hearing banging on her bedroom window and her front door. My mom continues to hear banging on her window and front door. And it's always 3 knocks. Some soft, some hard, and at different times throughout the day. Their cameras have yet to catch anything, but many family members who've come to visit have witnessed the same knocking. Heard footsteps walking around at 3 a.m. Last week I was visiting family in Nicaragua. I was staying with them in a guest house in a room with my dad. The room has its own bathroom, and my cousin set like a divider and made my bed and my dad's their own little private room with the curtain separating them. My dad had the habit of waking up super early in the morning and making a lot of noise when walking to the bathroom. However, the night before our flight back home, I was awoken by the sound of footsteps walking around. My initial thought was, there he goes, up so early. I expected the light to be turned on, but they never did and kept pacing around. My second thought was, why is my dad just walking around with no flashlights and won't turn on the lights? I grabbed my phone that was on my bed and checked the time. It was 3:02 a.m. At that moment, I realized it wasn't my dad, and I laid frozen in bed. By 3:20, I heard some sound coming from my dad's side of the room, and I see a flashlight. I asked him if it was up. He said, yeah. Then he got up to go to the bathroom, and as he walked to the bathroom, his footsteps sounded lighter than what I previously heard. The footsteps sounded heavy and fast-paced. I told my dad about what happened, and he believes me, and so did my cousins and family members. They said they've also heard strange noises coming from that room, usually when it's empty. I'd never been scared, but that night put doubts in my mind. Ask Reddit. I was a teenager. I went on a hike in south-central Pennsylvania by myself in the Appalachian Mountains. It was a day I was playing hooky, so there was nobody else at the small trail, at least that I could see. You had to drive there and there was no foot traffic. I was young and had been talking and singing and horsing around the whole time. totally unconcerned. I was yelling things off the top of the mountain, and on my way down from the mountaintop, I heard my dad's voice call my name and ask for help. I thought I was having a stroke. I stopped and almost started to follow, thinking, what the fuck is my dad doing here? Did he follow me or something? Then I came to my senses, told myself, my dad is sitting in his office like an hour or more away. I heard it 2 more times in the space of about a minute or two, calling my name and telling me to come here and help me. It sounded so insistent, like it was urgent, and it was without a doubt my father's voice. I never ran so fucking fast. I used to do this hike in bare feet, and I remember fucking my feet up hurrying down the mountain. Never went back, and to this day, don't know what the fuck that was. I immediately drove to my dad's office, and he was sitting at his desk working. Ask Reddit. When I was in high school, we lived in one of those cookie-cutter 1950s houses. 11 feet apart, 1 floor with a basement. I experienced a lot of things in this house, and to this day I cannot explain them, despite being a big skeptic in the supernatural. For context, my mom, my stepfather, my younger brother, and my older brother all lived in this one tiny 1-floor house with a dog and a cat. The animals frequently slept with any of us, but I had went to bed alone. My bed was a full-sized bed pushed into the corner of my bedroom away from the doors. My room was in the middle of the house, but still had a wall and a window that faced the backyard, and a door that led to the kitchen, and a door that led to the hallway. I was facing toward the wall, trying to sleep, and like many lights, not having much success. Nights. The house was dark and quiet. Everyone was asleep. Behind me on the bed, I felt the familiar weight of my childhood cat, Joey, jumping onto it. I turned around to greet and pet. "Hi, Joe." And I stopped. There was nothing there. I noped out, rolled over, pulled the covers over my head, and forced myself to sleep. Sometime later, I was sitting on my bed, middle of the day. My bed starts vibrating. Not enough to notice if you weren't sitting on it, but could definitely feel that it was happening. The washer and dryer were in the basement on concrete, and that's on a different side of the house. They weren't even running. I have no idea how to explain it. Another night, both my bedroom doors were shut, and it was late at night. Everybody had been in bed as it was in the middle of the school week, and both parents worked. Dead silent except me waking up to a middle-aged man whispering, "Damn," in my bedroom at the foot of my bed. I could see my whole room from the faint glow of streetlights in the front yard, and no one was there. The other night I had to hide underneath blankets and force myself to sleep. That was a separate night, and I was having a severe, vivid nightmare. A decrepit, rotting, elderly ghost in a white, dirty dress, long, flowing hair that looked a bit like a witch, was full body floating above my bed, facing me. It was holding me down by my wrist, open mouth, angrily, screaming at me. I couldn't move. My entire body was paralyzed, and I couldn't scream, move my head, or anything. I laid there trying to close my eyes, so at least I wouldn't have to look at her. I woke up at 5 a.m., same position in bed as my dream, flat on my back, almost like I was restrained in bed, which is odd. I've always been a side sleeper. The same wrist hurting that she was holding my dream, too. Sleep paralysis? Possibly. But I know that it's the only time that something like that's ever happened. Sometime after, I had yet another dream about her. I was sitting on the floor of what my dream logic told me was a good friend's house. They had just moved in, so there was no furniture available. We were playing some kind of board or card game to pass the time. Across from me was a room with the door slightly ajar. It was nighttime, and the only light was the room that we were in. so I couldn't really see inside. I asked about it out of curiosity to the 4 other people I was with. They brushed it off, saying that we weren't supposed to go in there. It was nothing. I agreed, but something was telling me to find out what was in there for whatever reason. After trying to put it off and ignoring it for a good amount of time, I finally crept up to the partially open door, very slowly opening it. I could see stacks of boxes as tall as me, 5'11", by the way, not too short. I was crowding the room, and then the same witch, leaping out from me, a dark, small space behind the boxes with a noise I can only describe as a whistling teapot. I've never heard this in person. As I live in the US, we don't even own a teapot. Well, it was leaping or flying directly at my face with a twisted, rotting face with their mouth open, angry, and I woke up. My ears were still ringing from a scream. It was 3 a.m. My parents don't believe in the supernatural as they're religious. They would never talk about ghosts or anything as something that could actually happen. But I finally got my mother to begrudgingly admit that she saw something in that house too. A 6-foot-tall shadow figure of what she described as a male. She had been in bed sitting up and reading a book or a magazine. From her peripheral vision, she saw walking up to the hallway toward her room, and it stopped. She thought it was my older brother. He's 6 foot tall, medium build. So she looked up. No one was there. Her room was at the end of a hallway next to the bedroom, so no headlights or stray lights could reach it by mistake to cast said shadow. To make it more alarming, it was in the middle of the day. Even with her just telling me it, I could tell it really spooked the hell out of her. She never spoke about it again, though. Not sure if it's related, but thinking on it now, oddly enough, my mother had 3 miscarriages in this house, last one of which almost killed her. They never tried having children again. Fast forward when I'm 21, living with my now ex. We were on the top floor of an apartment. It was nighttime. He's fast asleep next to me in bed, facing away from me. I'm on my back trying to relax so I can sleep and failing miserably. My eyes are closed, but through my eyelids I can see a bright, slow, white flash of light at the foot of my bed coming from the dresser drawers that are closed. Which is odd. The curtains are closed on the only window in the room, which is to our left. The doors to the room are shut. It's pitch black in here, and there's nothing but woods outside our window. I saw the lights a few more times in that room over the years, and still have no explanation for it. I've seen the same lights in a few other places, but very spaced out over the years, and always when I'm in bed trying to sleep, when I have my eyes closed too. Now jump to when I'm 22. My parents and younger brother and I moved to another state, to a house that had only had one other owner before us. So you could kind of think of it as a brand new house. We had finally gotten our things delivered by the movers, and it was just barely nightfall. My younger brother and I were in his upstairs bedroom. My parents were out to dinner somewhere local. My brother and I are on the floor chatting, going through a penny jar that he found that was left behind from a previous owner. They left a lot of trash behind. This is when we heard something hit the hardwood floor downstairs. We both looked at each other like, what the fuck was that? Knowing that we were home alone, especially. We finally gathered the courage to go check it out after a whisper fighting about who would go down first and what it could be. There at the bottom of the stairs, perfectly in the middle of where you would walk down from the stairs, in the kitchen was a shrink-wrapped brand new baseball. Weird. Our parents are sleeping and much too old for that kind of mischief. We picked it up. It was dry, no teeth marks. Someone would have had to pull the said baseball from the medium-height box it had been in from my parents' room. I remembered seeing it in the box along with other random things earlier that day. We passed that on the way down the stairs as it was directly at the top of the stairs. We threw ideas on how the noise could have happened. We determined it was the fact that it was from the baseball hitting the hardwood floor, but we would have had heard it go down every step, hit the wall on the landing at the bottom of the steps, then bounce into the floor if it was one of our pets. We specifically heard it drop once, no bounce onto the wooden floor. Testing it, somebody would have had to drop it from waist height directly onto the wooden floor. Still, no explanation for this, or why we even had a baseball, as nobody even actively played baseball in our home since I was 10, let alone any sports. A few years later in the same home, I'm sitting on the couch. It's really late. Everyone else had been in bed for several hours. The living room was a very open space that connected to the entire first floor. I'm watching TV. All the lights are off with the volume on low. I'm directly under my parents' bedroom, and in the insulation in this house, it's garbage, so you can hear people walking on the sidewalk outside during the day. That kind of garbage. The basement door faces the living room and sits under the stairs that lead to the second floor. This is just to give you a visual. The door is just to my left within clear view. I hear someone shuffling up the steps slowly from the basement as if tired. I leaned forward, and without sitting cross-legged on the couch, waiting for the person to come up, I distinctly remember thinking it was odd as my stepdad woke up really early on. Definitely sounded like my stepdad. He shuffles his feet when he walks, so I thought it was him. I waited to tell him how I didn't realize he was down there as it was so late. I waited for about what felt like forever, but had to have been only about a minute. And that's when it clicked. The space between the floor and the bottom of the door was big enough to slip my hand under, and it had been dark this entire time, no light on. The door never opened. No one ever came out of the basement. I checked the time on my cell phone, and it was 3 a.m. I noped the hell out, went directly to bed. Maybe whatever it was followed me from the 1950s home that we just moved from. No idea. That was the last time I ever experienced anything I couldn't explain. I'll be 30 this year, and I watch a lot of ghost shows and consider myself to be well-educated and level-headed. Still can't explain any of that. Hope you guys enjoyed those crazy times. Well, the retelling of my crazy times in my life. They still weird me out. Black silhouette woman figure pacing back and forth in my great-grandmother's kitchen. I was pretty young. Not quite sure my exact age, but I was old enough to know what I saw. I was probably 10 or 11. I was staying at my grandparents' house to visit with my grandfather and play with my little cousin for a week or so. I had an air mattress set up in the living room to sleep on while my two cousins slept on the couches that are in the living room. The way the house is set up is you can see right into the kitchen from the living room, especially where my air mattress was. It was a perfect view of almost the whole kitchen. I was sleeping and everything was fine. No nightmares or anything like that. I didn't watch any scary movies or anything before bed. I woke up from my sleep and just looked around for a second. When I looked straight, I noticed a black silhouette woman pacing back and forth. I could only see above the waist because she was behind the kitchen table. She was just pacing back and forth. When I saw this, it freaked me the hell out. Got up and sprinted to my great-grandmother's room to wake her up. I told her I saw a ghost. I remember my heart was pounding. She got up to go check, but when we went out to the kitchen, the figure was gone. I'd never seen it again. At least any other time I'd been there over the years. My grandmother says I was seeing things from playing, well, too many video games as she put it. But I know what I saw, and no one can tell me otherwise. I don't know what else to make of the situation, just kind of freaky, and thought I'd share my one only true experience of seeing a real ghost. I guess my only question is, why would they be pacing back and forth?